listening to the Power of Inspiration and Awakening Radio with Julia Griffin. To master a higher frequency for a new state of mind. Once you walked in a forest of splendor in which everything you did and everything you thought was aligned. It is possible at this time to begin to return to the old knowledge. Intuitive healer and manifestor Julia Griffin is here to talk about this unique time in history when all sentient beings, animals, plants, trees, and the earth are intent on creating this change. The wolves awakened her to the most incredible light, which opened gifts and brought knowledge that she longs to share. You are creators, and you are born to be creators of beauty, possibility, and joy. Join Julia on a journey into a beautiful and magical world where amazing possibilities exist. Let us help open the door. The Power of Inspiration and Awakening with Julia Griffin starts right now.
Julia Griffin, and you're listening to the Power of Inspiration and Awakening on Transformation Talk Radio. Stay with us for the next hour and let us help you experience a higher vibration and a new state of mind. For those of you who are new to my show or you don't know about me, I lived with wolves for 10 years and I could completely understand their words and thoughts the way that you and I are talking now. They taught me to hear all animals, plants, and the thoughts of people. And so I became an intuitive as a result. I have a special guest today, Reynolds Thompson. She's an author who wants to talk about rewilding. As you may imagine, that's a topic that appeals to me very much. So let me tell you about her, and then we'll get our interview going. She's an author, facilitator of poetry and journal therapy, and a certified life coach who helps people discover and live their wild soul story so they can bridge the false divide between the outer and inner nature, earth, and self, and become fully creative, connected, and alive. She says that she believes that if we are to rewild the world, it has to begin by rewilding our own souls. And her writing conveys this passion. Her first book was Embrace Your Inner Wild. It was nominated as the Best Nature Book in 2011. Reclaiming the Wild Soul, How Earth's Landscapes Restore Us to Wholeness was a 2015 Nautilus winner. And her latest book, which we're going to talk about today, The Way of the Wild Soul Woman, is available for pre-order, and I think that it's out on May 14th. Her writings have also appeared in numerous publications and anthologies. So, Mary, could you tell us more about rewilding and what you're doing right now? What is rewilding?
Yes, I'd be very happy to. So, rewilding for me is really this process of deeply understanding that we are nature. So in our modern sensibility, we somehow have put humans off on this other level, thinking ourselves superior to the rest of the living world. And of course, we are, in the very truest sense, the earth in human form. We are made of the same stuff. We emerge from the same Gaian body and, starlit universe. So rewilding is putting that wisdom and knowledge front and center. Because when it's not front and center, we feel that we can dominate and destroy nature. And somehow that's not, we're going to get away with it. It's not actually going to devastate and damage our own psychology, spirituality, emotions, and of course, our ability to even survive.
Right. Well, having lived with wolves, I'm pretty familiar with that. But you make me think of two things. The first is an indigenous saying, which is that the four-leggeds are perfect. They've come to show us the way because everything else is in harmony with nature but us. And the idea is that they will teach us how to have that harmony. And the other thing is just a reminder that between 1500 and 2000, almost every indigenous culture on the earth was destroyed as we went into developing and machinery and the Industrial Revolution.
Absolutely. And of course, along with that, really genocide, so much of that wisdom was lost. I mean, that's part. And I feel that what we don't realize is that this is actually a trauma that exists within us. We know that we have traumatized and destroyed so many indigenous peoples across the world. But what we don't realize is how that damages us.
And so I think that one of your main themes is that if we understand the meaning, partially geographically, of nature, but also if we can reconnect with nature, we can find aspects of ourselves which we're rapidly losing in this culture because you don't even see children go out and play a lot now anymore.
Right. Richard Louv coined that term nature deficit disorder, which
Mm-hmm.
I think is a very powerful term and really speaks to the fact that, as you say, tragically, kids don't even get to play. I mean, when I was growing up, and clearly your experience, my goodness, I grew up in central London and I was still free to roam free. I was always in the parks. My favorite thing in the world was to burrow myself into what is called Holland Park until when I was growing up, when they closed the park, they rang a bell.
Uh-huh.
And I would stay there as long as possible after the bell so that I would just be able to get out of the park before they locked the gates. And the thrill, the excitement, the mystery, just that sense of aliveness that came just even from that small thing was so potent. And yes, and kids are losing that. And along with it, so many skills that make us fully human. The ability to be afraid and to be fine with it, to know that it's part of life, to be in our bodies, to notice the world around us. So, yeah.
Yeah, because no one initially walks with the wolf pack without feeling really afraid and having to overcome that fear and become
Yeah.
very aware of your body. So a lot of what you're talking about is how we read intuition through our physical body, which is part of being part of the earth.
Yes, yeah. And I think, for me, with the work that I do, it really came to me that you cannot heal within the system that created the wounds, right? So our modern industrialized, so-called enlightened world created these devastating soul wounds. And certainly in regards to the way of the wild soul woman, diminished and suppressed, the feminine. And so we try and get ourselves out of this mess and come fully into our own authentic, wild, creative selves. But the system itself is constantly working against us. It's like trying to advocate for environmental practices when the legal system is set up to stymie you at every turn. It's very, very hard. So for me, working with the earth archetypes that I do, it's about now shifting instead of fighting against the system, which is so rigid and weighted against us. Exactly. It's okay, that's going on. But now I'm going to find this place where I can come into my fullness. I'm not going to spend my whole time fighting this, but when I'm in my fullness, I'm going to do everything I can to dismantle this. But first, I have to come into my fullness.
I can remember I was living in a cabin near a mountain when I had my daughter, and my mother was there, and I walked outside for the first time with the baby, and the birds came down, and the squirrels came down, and the cows from across the street all came up to see the baby. And I remember my mother's as a dirt road. She said, "Why don't you take the baby across the street so the calves and the horses can see her?" And I realized they had been aware that I was very pregnant for the last 2 or 3 months. They had heard the baby and they wanted to see her. But I would never have known that otherwise.
That really touches so deeply. It's so beautiful and it's so true and it's so sad. It reminds me of a very, very wonderful poem called The Silence of the Stars. written by David Wagner. Are you familiar with it? Where he's with the bush people, or he's telling the story of Lauren Vanderpost, who spent a lot of time with the bush people in the Kalahari, and how when they bring a new child into the community, they lift him up so that the stars can receive him and sing to him and welcome him into the world. And that sensibility is so powerful.
So let's talk about the 5 initiations.
Mm-hmm.
You have the desert, the forest, the ocean and river women, and what else did we have? We had the grassland and the mountain.
You have a very, very good memory. Yes. And I'll just slightly switch that around, is that we have the mountains and the grasslands, because the grasslands in a way is that return. Yeah. So yes, in Reclaiming the Wild Soul, I had written about the landscapes as deserts, forests, oceans, and rivers. And then as I began this course with Tree Sisters, that's a sort of eco-fem nonprofit, and it was not teaching, guiding women through these different earth archetypes. The way they embodied them then became the desert woman and the forest woman and the ocean and river woman, etc. But also this sense of a birthing. So the sort of barren womb of the desert, that first place of beginning where we need to shed everything and even separate from community, which is so much of the Shiro's journey, that beginning blank page that we've yet to write upon. And you can't take a journey if you're so weighed down with old beliefs and all of those, things that we do carry. So this shedding. And then as we move into the forest, we're incubating. So in our modern world, the temptation is to shed and then leap to the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this is Forest Woman saying, no, slow down here, go inward, dialogue with your dreams, feel that, that instinct and intuition that you were talking about, really develop that, spend the time to nurture those seeds. Because so often also we'll get excited about something, we'll put it out into the world and people will trample over it. So you've got to have it be strong within you. And then we get to Ocean and River Woman, and that's really about longing, desire. We know that we literally flood with desire when we're sexually attracted to somebody, when we smell food that we just think is so tasty. And so it's about those deep desires, not the sort of mainstream flow that the modern culture has put us in, with these very shallow, sparky desires, but this really, why are we here? What's the passion that drives us? Where is our energy leading us? And how do we surrender to that? Then there comes a moment, and I think particularly in the times that we live in, where we confront the mountain and we say, okay, am I going to act and manifest and give birth to what is inside of me for the good of all? So it's that place now where we are really being tasked exactly with living true to our bedrock values and emerging into the world, and particularly frightening in the world we live in, which is constantly, bombarding anybody who puts their head above the surface. And, we have this kind of attack system going on, which is really ugly. But Mountain Woman says you have to. And if we do it together as women, we create a range of mountains, right? Not this lone peak, but this range of mountains that is going to change the very landscape of the world we live in. And then Grassland Woman is, how do we take these gifts back to our community? And often that's the hardest part of any journey, right? The Shiro's return is because we're so full of something that we want to offer our sacred medicine. But oftentimes the people we want to offer it to are like, nah, not really that interested. and that can be heartbreaking. So it's really cultivating that patience and that persistence. Don't give up here.
And you have questions or quests that go with each of these that people can read and see.
I do. Just recently, I did the impossible thing of counting how many rituals, explorations, meditations, journal prompts was in the book, and almost 80. Because I want people to experience, I want women to experience for themselves what this is like. And many of these rituals, bring a circle of women together and do them together, because this is how we're going to grow, is, in community. So,
well, I loved what you said about the watches and counting your steps outside. I find that impossible to do. But you have a really good reason for it, which is that you forget to notice how the world feels around you if you're trying to count how many steps you're taking.
Absolutely. It's you're not actually in relationship with, so many of us go outside to run, to burn calories. Let's face it. Mm-hmm. We do it because we want to be thinner. And that's the relationship with being outdoors, is just to see, how many steps we took and how much we ran. And, it's like, oh, that's not a relationship with nature. That's actually not loving your own body.
And I think I should say it here because I teach about intuitive work. Imagine that you can hear the trees. Imagine that they're talking to you. Imagine that the noises you're hearing from the birds are a message, and they will eventually become that.
It's so true. Thank you for saying that, Julia, because I believe imagination is so important to this. And what I like about working with the earth archetypes is the reality is not all of us have access to outdoor spaces, but those landscapes live within us. And through our imagination, we can awaken to them at any point and dialogue with them and listen to them. And, their wisdom is embedded into the very cells of our being. So wherever you are, but it takes imagination, it takes a willingness to step beyond the hyper-rational comfort zone that we've become accustomed to use this to enter the world of the imagination. But that is so powerful because nothing begins without a dream first, right? Yeah.
It has to be that dream. And so if you're going to do these things and you want to read the book, start imagining things. Imagine that things are happening and that the outer world is responding to you. I often work with people to create their dreams, and I say, if you want it to be twice as powerful, meditate outside because nature is perfect. Anything that we're thinking of that's good, she can redo it. I mean, we're having a very early spring, so if I look through the window, I can see like 4 or 5 trees in full blossom. Now, this is happening all over the southern part of the United States. Can you imagine how much energy that is?
Yeah. Yeah. Tapping into the seasons, of course, is very powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm very curious. So how did your journey lead you to this place of describing all these things and coming up with so many wonderful journeys?
Well, I would say, and I this isn't hyperbole, that nature saved my life. When I was 27 years old, I was a fearsome alcoholic. My life was really deeply painful. I was just shut into a dark room of my own being. And then it happened that I moved to San Francisco, and the beauty of the Bay Area began this tension inside of me, darkness in, beauty out. And I was going to go either way, into insanity and death, or meet and greet the beauty of the world. And thank heavens it was meeting the beauty of the world. But I remember how terrified I was when I got sober. I mean, I hadn't known anything else for over a decade but drinking. And I was, kind of detoxing, sweating, shaking. And I was hiking above a bluff in Marin County, California, on a really stormy day. And the Pacific below me was churning and the waves were crashing against the rock. And I had this thought, The ocean was in turmoil, just like I felt inside of myself, but it was really, really strong. And I felt in my mouth what I didn't know was ocean spray or my own tears, that's salty. And I felt this complete oneness with this body of water. And in that moment came this deep knowing that I was going to be okay. And that's been absolutely true for me. And that began this process of deep exploration and deep connection with the natural world, and how, when I listened to the messages that came to me, my life changed. And I could hear things from, like you were saying, how you heard the wolves just as if you would hear
Your
it was
voice.
that, yeah, that's was true for me, not with wolves.
Mm.
I'm but with the natural world. And the messages that came were such that I couldn't have listened to them if if a friend had dared to tell me, or a parent, God forbid. So it was this openness. And then years later, it was a study of poetry therapy, and this loving of the nature poets who always reflected on the natural world outside, but brought us back to our inner nature. And this dance, I began to really think about, so what is this relationship between our nature and nature? What is that? And became deeply curious. And out of that emerged the archetypes and all sorts of
Mhm.
things. Yeah.
Well, just because it's interesting, if you study the elements on an alchemical level, and that would be Akasha, fire, air, water, and earth, earth is the only element that is capable of absorbing our negative emotions and then putting it back into a beautiful form. And I discovered that myself when I had a really large garden, because I would go out there and dig or chop weeds whenever I was angry. And those parts of the garden were growing the most beautifully. And that taught me it's just energy that needs to be recycled.
That's so interesting you say that. This The Wild Soul Woman is coming out under the Findhorn Press um, imprint, and the story of Findhorn and the garden there is not dissimilar to what you said, because the garden grew at a time when the Cadies were in a very difficult, painful situation. And it was at that point the plants began speaking to her, really, and saying, this is what I need. And then this out of soil that shouldn't, and in a weather system that shouldn't have given birth to anything but a cabbage this size, suddenly everything was blooming. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so I think what we're trying to say here is that if you're sad, if you have a problem, if you're angry, if you don't know what to do, spend some time with the earth. The earth can transmute that energy into something that's beautiful and divine.
It's really true. One of the exercises that I have in the book is just, I am the body of the earth. So what I think is so interesting is many of us treat our own beings. I mean, we know the fierce inner critic, and we punish our bodies in so many different ways. And if we love the earth, and we would never dream of wanting to do that to our patch of garden or our local woodlands, we would want to honor and love. So when we realize that we are absolutely the earth in human form, and we can rest ourselves upon the earth and breathe ourselves into this oneness of just lying there and feeling how we breathe together, and then realize that everything we are feeling, everything we're experiencing is earth consciousness, and how we heal together, and how we find joy together, and how we celebrate together. To me, it's been very powerful. It's
It's
been.
also a rest from this kind of crazy electronic life we have now.
It's so much a rest from that craziness. Yeah.
Because you stop thinking and you stop feeling on an electronic level and you begin to feel on a physical level.
Yes. And that physical level takes you deep, deep, deep down through those ancestral lines. That's where you can deeply access that wisdom.
And I saw that you were writing about that. I think you were talking about relatives from Ireland. Was that what you were mentioning?
I do. I have a lot of Irish in me. And I never really thought about it actually too much. I'll be honest with you. My dad was Irish American. My grandmother on my mother's side was Irish American. And I never thought about it till I began writing and really got into poetry therapy. And then I realized that, my American friends would be saying, write a simple declarative sentence, and I'd be doing the Irish thing of coming at it slant, And I thought, oh, it's in me, the storytelling, all of those things. Yes.
Well,
So,
loving the nature poetry too, I would imagine.
and totally this connection to nature, the land, and the people that I was drawn to, in terms of, Seamus Heaney and John O'Donoghue and many of the great Irish Yeats poets. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. I said to a friend of mine, she said, are you always going to stay in Georgia? And I said, well, my family has land from when we first came over. And she said, well, that's not a good reason. And I said, but my people are buried here and I can feel them.
Oh, that makes me, so interesting because I live in Marin County, California, but my people are buried in London. And I feel that separation. I do.
Yeah.
It saddens me
Mhm.
that I probably won't end up in the same earth. I
Right.
mean, it's possible I may,
But
but
it's
it is a big
funny.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that the earth can connect us in those ways. That's what I was thinking about that, but it's true.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
does keep you connected. Well, it's time for us to go to break. So I've been talking to Mary Reynolds Thompson about rewilding. And I think that's also about changing the earth while we're changing ourselves. We're going to go to break and we'll come back and talk much more. Hi, everyone. We're back. Our guest today is Mary Reynolds Thompson. She's talking about the importance of being wild, of restoring our feminine nature, and moving into some of the archetypes that are detailed within her book. So stay with us, and we're going to have some experiences as well that you can share in. So, Mary, where do you want to start with this?
Well, let's begin with the experiences.
Okay.
Just to have people have a little taste of that. So Julia has very kindly offered to
Volunteer.
so she has volunteered for this. So I just want everybody just to maybe take a few deep breaths listening. And if you're comfortable, close your eyes or just soften your gaze, whichever is working. And all I'm going to do is name the archetypes. And as I name them, allow yourself imaginatively to reach out to whatever images, sensations, feelings arise in this moment around each of the archetypes. Okay? So just taking a few deep breaths, and if you're comfortable, closing your eyes. And we'll begin with the desert. And just allow whatever wants to arise to arise.
Do I say this or do we wait till the end?
I'm sorry, I should have been clearer. Yes, wait till the end.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. And then we move on to the next one, which is the forest. And just again, allow whatever feelings, whatever images, sensations that are here with you to arise. And take a few deep breaths into them. And now you're going to emerge from the forest into the watery landscapes, however they present, as a lake, a river, an ocean. Just feel, what's the energy like here? And then you feel the call of the mountain, and the mountain is there in any way it wants to present to you in this moment. And again, just notice what's present for you. And then finally, the grasslands await. However, again, they look to you in this moment, however they make you feel in this moment. And just notice and pay attention. And as you reflect on this short journey we have taken together, just notice if one of those archetypes is calling to you in this moment, particularly. And if you're torn between two, just pick. Just pick. Okay. Julia, do you have an archetype that's particularly landed with you in this process?
I'm sort of torn between the ocean and the river and the grasslands. But when I did the ocean, when I did the river, it immediately took me to the ocean and the beach. You know, like I felt like it was flowing me there. And then for the grasslands, I remember as a child on the farm, sometimes I would plant very large fields of grass and we would have picnics in them. And I was thinking about how lovely that was in the very early spring with the blue sky and the earth and people laughing and having fun.
Feels like both of those places held a lot of joy and connection and play for you. Yeah. So just for a moment, you can't get it wrong. It doesn't matter. We're just playing here. So just choose one. Just choose one.
I'll go with the river and the sea because the movement was so much fun.
And I noticed, funnily enough, that a smile came on your face when the water. Okay. So now just put your hand somewhere on your body, wherever you feel that watery sense of yourself. You know, just that.
My heart.
Yeah, your heart. Lovely. And sense that landscape, that waterscape inside of you, that beautiful river rushing all the way to the ocean. What does it know that you know?
Well, it knows what I forgot is that it can be very easy to make changes and flow to new places very quickly.
There you are.
Yeah.
So it can be as simple as that. It's conjuring an image and then feeling it inside. I love that you touched your heart. And then it does, you know. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, that was like the message was it's not that hard to change. It's not that hard to move. It's not that hard to create new things. You just have to let go and let the river carry you.
Yeah, that surrender to
that. And so it's a surrender that I obviously need to make.
Oh, yes. As someone who is really good at holding on personally, that's always a deep message for me. Yeah. Beautiful.
Well, I think with what you said about giving up alcohol, and I've certainly been through some difficult things in my life. When things are good, you try to hold on really tightly.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? And yet what we know from nature is everything is in process and constantly changing. And I don't know about you, but when I'm holding on, I completely squeeze the joy out of this thing I'm trying to hold on to because it's so wonderful. And I just think
instead of asking what form should this morph into, I'm like, oh, I want to keep this here. This makes me feel better.
Right, exactly. Not being attached to the form, being attached to the value, the desire, yes, but not the form that it takes. Yeah.
To trust the universe that if it takes another form, it will be just as good. It doesn't matter.
Right, right. Even better.
So tell me your story about riding a pig.
So you asked me originally, I mean, how did I get into this work? And there are always so many entry points, right? We have so many stories. But one of them is that when I grew up in London, and when I was first a baby until the age of about 10, my parents would take us on holiday to a place on the Amalfi coastline called Positano. It's now a very different high end, but then it was this really arty, bohemian, totally
Fun.
cool, fun place. But in the mountains, in a shepherd's hut, lived the amazing Vali. She was called the Witch of Positano. She was an Australian who had literally become famous in Paris for her dancing, and knew all the Django Reinhardt and all the totally cool people. And she was married to Rudy, who was a Romanian gypsy, and they lived up in this hut. And my parents were these wonderfully benignly neglectful parents. So my brother and I were just free to roam around Positano. And we would stay up and sleep in the caves up in this amazing cliffside where Rudy and Vali lived with the animals. She had all these dogs. Eventually, the great love of her life would be a red fox. And that was probably her greatest love. So even a goat named Barbara, after my mother, who had given Vali some money for a dressing gown when she had to go to hospital. And of course, she never bought a dressing gown, but she did buy a goat and named her after my mother. But it was this enchantment. Vali was an artist. She taught me to dance. And this might be of interest to you, because I was by the age I was 5 or 6, I would go down to the local nightclub and watch Vali. And she danced like a flame with these white limbs and this wild red hair and all these tattoos, almost like you couldn't see her feet touch the ground. It was so beautiful. And I would sit there, my tubby little body, and she said, darling, she said, come up here. She said, dance with me. And I didn't know how to do it. And she said, it's so easy. You just dance with the animals. You reach up and you touch the neck of a giraffe. You sweep your hands over the back of a donkey. You feed the chickens. And she said, you'll be dancing. And I, little, very imaginative child, I saw those animals. And all of a sudden, I didn't feel clumsy or awkward. I was dancing.
How wonderful.
Yeah, so I always say Vali taught me to dance. She was pure magic in my life. Yeah.
Well, I think we have magical teachers like that for a reason.
Well, it's so interesting because years later, I've come now to know people who've experienced Vali at different stages of her life, and we're sort of forming a community of sharing these experiences. But one of the things that completely blew me away, because when I started doing my poetry therapy and my ecology, spirit, environment, all of that, I wasn't thinking, I was following some path or some mentor. And then I saw this video of Vali where she said that her work was poetry, art, spirituality, and the ecology. And I just went, oh my God, she in a way really was my mentor. I had never connected the dots in a way between what happened then and what reemerged later in my life. But absolutely.
Yeah, she was your magic teacher.
She was my magic teacher. Yeah.
Yeah. So how often did you see her?
Well, every year, at least once a year. And then sometimes twice a year, sometimes we'd go out over the Easter holidays. But she looms so large in my life. And I actually tell a story in The Way of the Wild Soul Woman about the last time we left Positano. Heartbreaking. I would cry and throw up every time we left. I just was distraught, And she gave me this little pocket that she had sewed of silk, and it looked like old lace, like parchment colored, and she had put things inside of it. And she told me it was a magic pouch and that I could never look and see what was in it. Mm-hmm. That was the thing. So of course it never left me. I carried it around everywhere. I slept with it under my pillow. But over a couple of years, I had touched it so much, the fabric was fraying. Mm-hmm. So then in my mind was, well, it wouldn't really be cheating if I opened it. So I put it under my pillow that night, as always, and I knew the next day it would be irresistible, right? I was going to have to find out what she had put in it. Next morning, woke up, wasn't there.
Oh, how
Looked
strange.
everywhere, tore my bed up, every pocket, everything, never found it. So then fast forward, and I'm like 19 years old or something, and I meet Bali and Rudy again down the Portobello Road in Carnival. And we invite them back for dinner. And I tell Bali that story. And she just said, of course, sweetheart. She said, you were never meant to know. That was the magic. And that taught me that there are some things that are unknowable, that mystery is as important as the known, that what we don't know is deep and compelling and vital. And just her matter-of-factness, of course, you know.
Well, that's what calls us, is because the mystery is unknowable. We can move more deeply into it every time we have a realization. But if we go to our calling, it's like something within the mystery is calling us.
It's absolutely true. For me, that one lives very much in the forest landscape of that mystery, of the thing that you can sense, but you can't see it. But you feel the presence of it. Exactly. And so you begin to kind of almost stalk it through the forest, right? And it's also stalking you. That's what's so interesting, because that thing is also curious about you, that mystery. There's something there. And we may never find, as you say, the answer, but the process of that relationship is the answer. Exactly. Exactly.
And when you move into a certain realization, it moves closer to you.
It does. It does. And then it opens up another mystery.
Exactly. But we wouldn't stay engaged if it didn't. And I think that's like another thing about the earth that's so fascinating. There's so many things hidden within it. Yeah. And there's so many secrets. Like if you spend a lot of time in the woods, you may start to notice all the birds' nest, or get to see the babies, or a blue heron lands in front of you, or the deer all right there. It's always like that. It's never not a surprise.
It's really true. And it never gets old. And also, everybody's talking about fungus now. Nobody even thought how important what happened out of sight under our feet was. And now everybody's talking about it. But it's that sense of understanding that our vision is so limited. We really have to train ourselves. And I think one of the things for forests, for me, that's really interesting is it's not, this kind of looking. It's this diffuse sensing that you hear a sound over here, something's rustling here, and it's a much softer, wider, layered, exactly.
Because like if the energy changes, the wind will change, the sun will change, the trees will change, the call from the birds will change. But you usually don't know that at first, but it tends to dawn on you in a few minutes.
Yeah. And it cultivates deep attention, which is something that is a good thing.
It's a very good thing. So if women and other people begin to rewild themselves, what do you think would be the outcome of that? And what would be one thing you would say that people can do? I mean, obviously they can read your book and do the exercises, but what else?
Well, I think one of the things to do is, first of all, acknowledge that the system that we live under does not help anybody, doesn't help women, doesn't help men, doesn't help societies, children, no, anybody. So we live in a toxic environment. So don't blame yourself. Whatever's going on, whatever, however imperfect we're in a system and we're all swimming in it. So first of all, deep gentleness for the journey that we're all on. But I feel, and maybe you do too, because obviously you're so energy sensitive, there is this immense wave of energy waiting to be released.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that none of us can do it alone. This is another myth of the modern world. So that when we, and men will do it too, and all people, gender fluid, trans, everybody welcome on this journey. But women right now are on the cusp. We are feeling and being hurt by the laws, the environmental damage more than men. And we are mad and we are angry. And in a way, we want to get even, but that's not going to do it. What we need is this great creative wave. So I believe, and this is what I know to be true, that when women begin to engage with these archetypes, they find hidden strength that they did not have before. They find their passion, they find their purpose, they find their place in this world. And they are no longer afraid to speak out on behalf of life, of this amazing planet. And we learn very deeply through the message of our ecological systems not to compete with each other, which has always been the thing that has held women back, is that we have been given this scarcity message that there are only so many this and that, and we have to fight to get it. No, we have to lift each other up, and we have to
love to get it.
We have to love to get it, and we have to redefine power. This is one of the great messages of the mountain woman, is not power over, but power with, in partnership. So we get to redefine a lot of the things. Like in the desert, we learn what it's like to be self-sufficient, to not to be so needy of approval, of accolades, of thinking that we need somebody to make us okay about ourselves. In the forest, we learn that our dreaming is a vital part of the dreaming of the earth, and that we need all of our dreams. In the oceans and rivers, we recognize and respect this deep, passionate purpose that we have been brought here at this time to unleash. And in the mountains, we discover how to be powerful in a new way, as vulnerable people, as visible and vulnerable and courageous and broken, and all of those ways. And it's fine. And then in the grassland, we learn to find those communities that can hold us up. And in so many cultures around the world, there's this thing that you cannot be yourself without community. And I think it's really true, because it's in that cut and thrust of being with other people, some of whom annoy the heck out of you, some of whom you love, that you really refine and begin to define the gifts that you have. So when you do those things, it doesn't mean the problems go away or the challenges go away, but you have this incredibly deep, rich, creative reservoir to draw on. And these archetypes are our ancestors. They have our backs, and they are wanting us to emerge in our fullness. I believe that very deeply. So, yeah.
You're thinking, and I agree with you, we have to love the earth enough to connect with her. And then we have to allow enough so her energy comes through us and changes us if we're going to join together collectively.
Absolutely. And I love that, because it is that sort of opening up, isn't it, to the being the channel. I think that's part of desert preparation, is, get rid of all the clutter so that you can be that openness for
You have to allow it to come in. It doesn't just come in. You have to allow it to come in.
Exactly.
But we can.
Absolutely. And we must. I mean, I hate to use the word must, but if not now,
When?
Yeah, truly.
I know.
Yeah.
And I always say too, something everyone can do is see the water as cleaner. See the big trees as being there. See flowers everywhere. See a society that we've learned to live in alignment with on an environmental level. We can begin with a vision.
I think getting with a vision is absolutely key. And I think this is the whole thing about it's not enough to be against something.
Exactly.
What's the vision that we're working towards? Yeah.
Because people are always saying, this doesn't work, let's get rid of it. But then you've created a void and you have to put something in the void.
Yeah. And if you leave a void, bad things tend to come into it.
I know.
Right?
Then it's a dark hole. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, your work is so beautiful, and I so much appreciate your being with us today. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you? I see you have classes, and your book will be out soon.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for inviting me today. The best place to find out everything about me really is my website, ReynoldsThompson.com. And also there you can download 5 music meditations, original ones based on each of the archetypes. So it's rather fun if you're somebody who likes to be more in your body. These are very helpful tools to awaken to those archetypes.
Well, they just saw how we had fun with it.
Exactly.
And you can find me at One True Self, onetrueself.com. And I have classes, and you can sign up for my bi-monthly newsletter. Thank you so much for being with us today, and I'll see you in a couple weeks. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to the Power of Inspiration and Awakening Radio with Julia Griffin to master a higher frequency for a new state of mind. Join us next time as Julia takes us deeper into the memory of the moments of light where transcendence and enlightenment emerge. The memory of the jewel of consciousness is always lived within you to tap into waves of energy and create huge changes by imagining the beauty of the vision and desires that are hidden in the heart. Learn to find your way back to nature, beauty, and your own heart, which holds the secrets of your existence and future. To discover more about Julia's adventures, animal communication, and the teachings she brings to every show, visit onetrueself.com. That's onetrueself.com. That's ONE, trueself.com.